If you want to live longer and stay super healthy, optimize your health and lifespan, then this video is for you. Today I'm going to be breaking down the top 10 science-backed tools that can extend your lifespan and improve your health span. We're going to be talking about tools that can help support your hormones and help us just age beautifully as women. I'm Barnes-Lentz, an expert in female longevity. I've studied the topic for over a decade. I speak all around the world on this topic, and I founded a medical clinic where we really focused on this topic particularly. I'm also, I believe, one of the most measured women in the world, so stay tuned and we're going to get into it. Tool number one is resistance training. It's the gold standard for maintaining muscle and bone density and metabolism and even brain health. We need to be training at least 2 to 4 times per week using compound movements like squats, lunges, and rows. It's really a non-negotiable for longevity. If there was one pill for longevity, it would certainly be exercise. The second tool would be sauna. So we know that sauna is one of the most accessible tools for reducing the risk of all-cause mortality, dementia, cardiovascular events, and so much more. Using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week has literally been shown to reduce all-cause mortality by 40%. It boosts detoxification, cardiovascular health, and cellular repair via heat shock proteins. Tool number 3 would be red light therapy. This is particularly important for us women because we have the highest density of mitochondria in our brain and heart, but also in our ovaries or our oocytes. So we really need to be supporting those mitochondria for improving ovarian longevity and extending ovarian health span. I also love red light therapy for just boosting mitochondrial function throughout the body. I also love it for on the skin to really help reduce fine lines and wrinkles. It's super helpful, very effective, and also relatively accessible. Tool number 4 is supplementation. So I love precision supplementation through a test called the micronutrient panel from Vibrant Wellness, and we can target exactly what we need. When we're thinking about longevity supplementation in particular, things like precursors to NAD like NR or NMN or even NAD itself in the form of IV therapies or at-home injectables can be really beneficial for supporting fertility, ovarian longevity. We also have things like spermidine, which can mimic autophagy, super helpful. And I also love urolithin A, which is amazing for improving mitochondrial health. It's one of the most studied supplements for boosting mitochondrial health, and it's one of my favorites. So in a form of supplementation, we want to think about key supplements, things like magnesium, fish oil, and vitamin D. Then we have our protocol supplements, so that's whatever we're working on based on our labs. And then third, we're going to have these longevity supplements, so things like the NR, the urolithin A, the NMN, spermidine, and there's a few others that I really love. The next thing is comprehensive female biomarkers. Reviewing lab panels consistently, at least 1 to 2 times per year, is going to actually tell you what's going on in your body. Yes, we can do all the things. We can work out, we can sleep well, we can use red light, sauna, hyperbaric, the whole 9 yards. But if we don't know what our risks are, so potentially looking at a genetic test and then comparing that with blood biomarkers, we really don't know our current health status. I love to look at a comprehensive metabolic panel, hormone panel, nutrient panel. I'm also doing gut testing. I'm also doing toxin testing, also looking at numbers and stats such as VO2 max, grip strength, body composition, bone mass. So I have an entire list of all the labs that I'm doing on protocol.kaylabarnes.com. And I also have it broken down by budget. So where I would start if I only had a limited budget, moving up to a more expansive budget. So you can check that out, but measuring is so incredibly important to not only track if our interventions are working, but really to understand your current health status and get ahead of anything that may be an issue in the future. Let me give you an example. You don't just develop diabetes overnight. You can clearly see the trends in a marker called HbA1c, which is a 3-month measurement of your glucose. But if you don't check that marker, then you're certainly not going to know that you're trending in the wrong direction. So these labs can be so incredibly helpful for prevention, early awareness, and then you can take action on an intervention that will actually work. The next pillar is definitely nutrition. So we have to be eating adequate amounts of protein for women, and that actually changes throughout the life cycle. I'm going to be doing a full video on this, how I would optimize my protein in each stage of life, but I'm usually aiming for about 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. If you are looking to add on muscle, you can increase that to about 1 gram. And also within perimenopause, you'd want to be at about 1 gram. And then getting to menopause, you're even going to increase that more because we know it's more difficult to put on muscle mass. I'm not, vegan or carnivore. I've tried every diet, and definitely just a whole foods, single ingredient diet is the best. The Mediterranean diet has been studied for longevity. It is the most science-backed longevity diet on the planet. And it's really just things like avocados, dark leafy greens, always organic when you can. There are amounts of red meat in the diet, which I do consume. And we're going to review in the menstrual cycle optimization video how we can leverage these grass-fed meats during specific times of our cycle to actually enhance our performance and make us feel better and ensure we're not running any nutritional deficiencies. So yes, I eat some red meat in moderation, always grass-fed and grass-finished. And also, we want a lot of healthy fats, things like avocado, things like nuts and seeds. I like to soak them and sprout them so they're easier to digest. But olive oils, things of that nature is really what we're aiming for in a diet. If it has a list of ingredients, I avoid it. That includes protein bars. For me, if I need a quick snack on the go that's protein, I do some hard-boiled eggs or maybe some air-dried beef or air-dried salmon. And wild-caught salmon and fish are definitely part of this diet as well. So I love a brand called Seatopia because they actually test the fish for microplastics and heavy metals. Really, really important. It also is all sushi grade, so it tastes amazing. No fishy taste. You can literally use it as sashimi if you want. I don't do that too often. Fish do run the risk of potentially having parasites, so I typically avoid that. But nutrition is definitely a cornerstone of the pillars of longevity. With that, we want to talk about water quality. There was a new study that just came out actually saying that glass water bottles could have the same amount or more as plastic water bottles, which is just so sad, right? I've invested a ton of money and time really seeking out these glass water bottles, but the study does say it's mostly due to the cap. So the plastic on the cap kind of flaking into the actual beverage. So still drinking out of glass is definitely the best. Now I am going back to mostly reverse osmosis water filtration, spring water, that actually comes in a form of delivery. So we do have options for sure, but focusing on our water quality. And if you're doing RO, we need to be remineralizing that. Super, super important because RO does strip us from all the minerals of the water. Tool number 7 would be peptides like BPC or MOTS-C or epitalin. These compounds support healing, energy, and regeneration. They're really becoming a cornerstone of regenerative medicine and personalized longevity. Depending on what you're struggling with or looking to improve, that's when the customization of these peptides would come into play. I love BPC for joints, for regeneration. You can use oral BPC for gut issues, super helpful. Something like MOTS is great for balancing blood sugar. There is kisapeptin for, improving libido. We have GHCKU copper peptide, which is great for skin health. And we also have things like CJC, epimorelin, and tesamorelin if you're interested in changing body composition, adding a little bit of muscle, which we know is so important, especially as we age. So when I get into perimenopause or menopause, CJC or tesamorelin will be like a staple. There's also the most famous peptides right now, which are GLP-1s. So if you're struggling with weight, you just can't lose the weight, I might consider microdosing a GLP-1. I'm not currently on a GLP-1. I have tried microdosing of a GLP-1, but didn't necessarily love the effects it had on my resting heart rate and my sleep quality. So it's really a trade-off. If you need to lose weight, it's a game changer for overall health and longevity. We know that our body composition needs to be in a good place. If you are taking a GLP-1, like with everything, consult with your doctor and ensure that you have a really great and diligent strength training program, because we do know that these peptides, GLP-1s, can reduce muscle mass, specifically in women. So we want to make sure we're maintaining and adding muscle mass while doing something like a GLP if we're going to be using that for weight loss. The next thing is sleep optimization. So we have an entire video on my wind down routine. We'll drop it in the links below. Highly encourage you to watch that. Shows how I get some of the best sleep scores on Aura, but sleep optimization optimization is everything, particularly for women. When we go to bed, and we want to be in bed before 12 for sure, but I always say before 10, because the best impact on our hormones happens during that time, during those deepest stages of sleep. It's incredibly important for our cortisol balance, and cortisol is not a bad thing. We need cortisol to live. We need it to be productive. We need to wake up in the morning, but we don't want to have too high of cortisol. For women, that can actually induce something called the progesterone steal. So if your cortisol is too high on a consistent basis, it can actually steal your progesterone, making your cycle imbalanced, which is absolutely what we don't want. Specifically, women with anything like PCOS or really any metabolic or endocrine disorders definitely need to be prioritizing sleep. I think everybody should build their day around sleep like I do. I'm in bed every day by 8:30, but high quality sleep, super important. You want to have red lights on at night, no eating about 4 hours prior to bed. We want a cool, dark room, blackout shades if you can, or an eye mask, and just optimize your room for sleep. So important. So as a recap on sleep, love all of the tools that I mentioned earlier, but I also love to track my sleep with an Oura Ring. So this, I'm looking to understand my deep and REM sleep. I'm aiming for at least an hour and a half of each. Also looking at my resting heart rate, my HRV, it tracks my steps during the day, activity, and so much more, but it'll also give you a sleep score. So I'm always aiming to have that score in the 90s. If you're nowhere near that, don't worry. Just start implementing some of these practices here and in my other video of my wind down routine, and you'll watch your scores improve. Absolutely love that. The next part is social connection. So we know that being lonely can be as devastating to our health as smoking. This is really a serious topic. If you're not carving out time in your schedule to actually interact with friends in real life, by the way, I think this entire age of social media can be super beneficial, but we also need to spend time with humans that we love in real life. So I schedule workouts with dear friends. I also host female longevity dinners at my place where I have a chef come in, make a super amazing organic meal. We have it at like 5 p.m. It's great, but this is a time for me to really connect with other like-minded women. I'm also married, which has a huge beneficial impact on your health if it's a good marriage. So if you're not in a good marriage, I would recommend really thinking through how you might be able to improve that. That's an entirely different story. But also if you're looking for a partner, know that the quality of that relationship is going to be incredibly impactful on your health. So prioritizing social connections at all costs. And the last piece is stress management. This is really important, particularly for women, because we are more sensitive to cortisol, meaning my husband and I could have an experience or a stimuli of the same, so let's say cold plunging, and my cortisol response would be significantly higher than his, even at the same temperatures, same duration. So this means that women typically have a higher baseline level of stress. I'm going to show you guys a slide of my stress last year versus my stress this year, and we're going to talk about some of the protocols that I've implemented for this. So I now have 4 times per day that I'm implementing a stress management practice. So it starts in the morning with reading my Bible, journaling, and taking a walk in nature. That's my first set. My second set comes a little later in the day where I do breath work and really activate my parasympathetic nervous system. Later in the day, I do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which actually puts me into a parasympathetic state. But you could do another walk, you could do gratitude journaling, you could do a meditation, whatever gets you into that parasympathetic state. And then lastly, I do another breathwork session, some prayer, some meditation, something again in the evening to reduce stress. I also love doing pulsetto on the stress feature because that helps to shift me into parasympathetic. So whatever it is that you love that can relax you, definitely think about how can you implement this, 3 to 4 times per day into your schedule. I also encourage you, if you're a woman, to look at your Oura Ring stress. If you have some sort of tracker and can track the amount of stress you're under every day, it can be really illuminating because sometimes we can compartmentalize this stress. We don't really notice that this is impacting us in the way that it is. Another thing that I will say is that cutting out toxic people from your life can also be incredibly beneficial. I'm not saying that you go around and cut out everyone that is causing you any amount of stress, but track patterns and behaviors. And if there's someone that's constantly popping in and spiking your cortisol and putting you into this state of, sympathetic nervous system activation, then it's something to consider. I think one of the biggest things that I did to improve my stress from last year to this year is actually removing a few people that were very much so causing a bit of tension in my life. So it wasn't an easy decision, but it made sense for a variety of reasons. And one of the biggest ones being for my health. So it can be a hard decision. The other thing I would recommend is if you're dealing with any lingering emotional issues, or maybe your nervous system has literally been wired like mine was to be in a sympathetic state. I grew up in a pretty stressful household, then moved into being an entrepreneur and had, quite stressful interactions in my day-to-day life. I was working so many hours per week. So basically for my entire life, I've only known this state of stress, and it showed on my Oura ring. For sure. So if you're dealing with anything like that, something like a therapy or, a variety of different treatments or protocols can help you learn to unwire that constant state of sympathetic to be in a more relaxed and parasympathetic state. Maybe we'll do a video on my experience a little bit more in depth, but I think this is an absolute game changer for your health. And to be honest, if you could just prioritize a few of these things, I think optimizing your nutrition, sleep, and exercise, and then as a woman working on that component of stress, that would be a game changer all in of itself. So these are all science-backed practices for longevity. I'm Kayla Barnes-Lentz, an expert in female longevity, and I hope that you subscribe to this channel to get more content like this.